Max MPS Radio. I'm your host, as always, Jan Frisse, and today I have Jacob Schepis, I hope I pronounced that right, on this show.
Nailed it.
And yeah, I'm really excited for it, man. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Now you nailed the pronunciation of my name. And not many people do that first off, so well done, bro. It's a pleasure to be here.
Cool. Appreciate it. First and foremost, for somebody who doesn't know you, maybe you can introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you're doing and what you're basically doing for a living, and you're actually prepping right now. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
For sure. So, my name's Jacob Schepis. I'm a coach from Australia, live in Melbourne currently. And I'm very fortunate. I run two personal training facilities, JPS Health and Fitness down here. So we have two locations, and currently I'm personally working with a lot of bodybuilders, powerlifters, and people who are just physique and strength enthusiasts in general. Our facilities have 15 coaches. We work with a bucket load of people. So on average, we coach around 200 to 300 people a week, about 500 to 600 sessions a week. So I'm in the trenches. I know a lot of the individuals that you have on the show, obviously in academia, researchers, and very well versed with the literature. And I'm probably on the other end of the spectrum where I've been in the game now for, as we were discussing before we came on the show, 8 to 9 years. So day in, day out, I'm on the gym floor watching people squat, and seeing, how we can apply the latest, research to our clients, and obviously trying to achieve optimal outcomes for whatever their goals require. So, that's a little bit about me in terms of what I'm doing now. Also a competitive bodybuilder and powerlifter, so obviously lifting weights for a very long time now, since I was 16, so nearly 10 years, which feels like a lifetime. It is for many people. And this year is a competitive bodybuilding season for me, so we're into the contest prep, and I just realized this now, that it's been 16 weeks since I started my contest prep diet, which it feels like just yesterday. So it's flying. And I guess we're going to talk a little bit about that today, my thoughts on that, and discuss some other topics related to natural bodybuilding.
Yeah, cool. Fantastic introduction. Actually, before we dive into today's topics, maybe you can talk a little bit about your upcoming shows. When are they, and when and where are they?
So I have an open-ended prep.
Okay, cool.
I haven't picked a specific date, and I see this to be beneficial but also problematic, because it gives you greater flexibility and obviously less pressure with the time frames around your contest prep, and that can be really beneficial because you jump on stage when you're ready, as opposed to having that deadline in mind, and then the subsequent pressure that comes with that. But I also think that it can be the downfall for many, and I'm starting to question whether or not I do need to pick a show date and have something set in stone so that I can hone in and see when the finish line is, so that I can pace myself appropriately. I think that an open-ended show is probably more suited for experienced bodybuilders, and I've competed a few times, but I do think that it might be time to pick a date and lock it in. But I've got some rough time frames. We're looking at September and October, but again, it's just one of those things where there's no specific date or show set at this stage, because I have such a, big support base in Melbourne. I probably will make my first show somewhere interstate and not tell anyone, and that's going to piss a lot of people off, but I just want to go and do my thing. People perceive me to be very extroverted on social media and stuff, but when it comes to my bodybuilding, I'm actually quite introverted, and I just like to, keep to myself and do
Interesting.
my thing. So yeah, so as you know, social media is part of the business, part of the game of coaching. So I do my best to put out content frequently and be open and honest and all the rest of it. But I do have this part of me when I start bodybuilding, um, especially when I'm bodybuilding and in contest prep, that becomes quite internalized, and I like to keep to myself. So the first show will likely be somewhere where nobody can see me and nobody knows about it. And then I'll definitely come back and do a show in Melbourne. And yeah, I'm sure I'll have a lot of friends and family come support me. But September, October, my friend. And yeah, we'll see how it goes from there.
So you still have quite some time to diet.
Yeah, six months out.
You're working with 3DMJ, right?
Correct. So I've got the man, the myth, the legend, Alberto Nunez in my corner. He's handling the diet side of things, and
Okay,
I'm doing my programming and things like that. So yeah, he's been fantastic so far.
definitely.
Um, yeah, we've come out swinging. We're in a really good position. I'm down, I think, 6 kilos since January.
Hmm.
So in the 4 months, we've lost 6 kilos. So quite a rapid rate of loss initially at the start, and then this last 4 to 6 weeks has been very much tapering down the rate of loss, just maintaining and setting ourselves up for the next dieting phase.
Cool. I'm actually, you will not notice since it's a German podcast, but I'm actually doing a contest prep series with one of Berto's clients, like on the podcast.
Yes, I saw that. Yes, I
Yeah,
saw that. It's very cool.
yeah, Berto's a legend.
He knows his stuff, man.
Yeah, definitely. So or we will talk about contest prep flexibility. That is actually the first topic. And I would ask you, like, just how did the flexibility in the first 4 months changed, and what do you think you will have to adapt to in terms of flexibility in the last 6 months or in the next 6 months?
Yeah, I think this is a great topic of discussion because people perceive a contest prep to be this all or nothing, picture perfect process. And that
Hmm.
as soon as they start a contest prep, they need to be 100% perfect, hitting their macros to the gram. And as you and the listeners will now know, my contest prep was 9 months, and doing that and having such a rigid or very structured prep for such a long duration for most people can be problematic. And it's like anything. If we go too hard too soon, if we have to run the course for a very long time, we can burn out very, very
Yeah.
quickly. And there are definitely people who can, track their calories, macros, weigh all their food to the gram and have no adverse outcomes. And I know Steve Hall is one of those people. He can weigh his food and just, nail his targets day in, day out.
Yeah.
And he doesn't bat an eyelid. But obviously, a lot of us, that becomes quite burdensome and exhaustive. So I think having some flexibility at the start of your contest prep can be extremely beneficial in allowing you to sustain the journey to the stage. And obviously, when we speak of flexible dieting, I'm not just talking about the food choices that we're making and including a wider array of foods, but that's definitely one area of flexibility. But also the ranges in which you hit your calories and macros, the eating out,
Hmm.
weighing and measuring foods, and just the mindset and approach in general. So I can draw on my own contest prep and share some insight for the listeners as to what this means and looks like in practice. So I have quite literally over the last 4 months weighed probably about 80%, 90% of my food. Now
Okay.
this assumes that you have a great understanding of
Yeah.
nutrition and experience in calorie macro tracking, and you're very good at portion sizes and estimating food portions, all the rest of it. And I eat out probably once or twice a week, obviously very selective with where I go, what I do choose. But again, I still was able to make significant progress, because I think, instead of looking at your diet at the initial phases of your contest prep as this, static target that's obviously quite small, the calories, the macros, and all the rest of it. If you instead open up that target just a little bit so that you're within the ballpark more times than not, and ensuring that you are making progress. This is the key. If you're not making progress, your adherence to the plan and the flexibility needs to reduce. But if you're making progress at the appropriate rate, and we'll get into that in a second, then I think having more flexibility at the start of your contest prep will allow you to tighten the reins and, turn up the notch, so to speak, the dimmer switch, which is an analogy I like to use in relation to this, when it counts, which is towards the end of the contest prep.
Yeah.
So the dimmer switch analogy, like I mentioned, people think in very dichotomous terms. They're either, off the diet, off season, or they're on the diet, contest prep. But instead, if we understand that, it's much like a dimmer switch, we just turn the lights up, which is obviously the degree of accuracy with which we're, meeting our targets in the plan, and then we can turn it down a couple of notches and have more flexibility, right? So at the start of the contest prep, we're simply turning things down a little bit, just enough so that we can make progress, and then when the time calls for it, we stall, and, we're getting to the nitty-gritty. We can no longer, eyeball a portion size of chicken. It's like we need to weigh that sucker. We turn things right back up so that we can see with greater clarity all the details and manage the variables appropriately so that we can get the desired outcome. And like I said, when we have more fat to liberate at the start of the contest prep, it's a lot easier to get away with a higher degree of flexibility and turning that switch down, because the rate of loss can be so high. Whereas when we get leaner and leaner and leaner, get closer and closer to the stage, we have less and less fat to liberate. Obviously, we have a host of metabolic adaptations that occur, reductions in NEAT, hormonal markers obviously change. All these factors start influencing, the energy balance equation. Therefore, we need to start turning up the notch and make sure that we are monitoring every variable affecting that energy balance equation, so that we can eke out those last couple of 100 grams and bring in the striated glutes.
Yeah, absolutely. I would absolutely just agree to that. I think it's just at the end, at some point, you just need more structure and less flexibility, actually. But in the beginning, it also comes down to having a lot of time. Like you have like a 9 months prep, right? And if you just in the ballpark of making progress and losing the weight that you want to lose, at least in some type of ballpark, then you're absolutely fine. And then having more structure throughout the prep and getting more into the routines of tracking and stuff like that, I think it's a really fine way of doing it. But I think it also comes down to the individual. Like as you said, for example, Steve Hall, and I also find myself to do it as well. I can just weigh my stuff and just I don't mind it. Like it's not really fun, but it's like I just do it on a daily basis. And I'm currently in my off season, and I still track at least the stuff I eat at home when I'm currently eating out like 1 to 3 times a week maybe, and just enjoying life actually. But when I'm home, I have no problem to just throw it on the scale and then just eat it.
Yeah, you make a lot of good points, and I will say one thing, excuse me, on that, is that you do have to be very careful with the amount of flexibility that you afford yourself during the early phases of a contest prep, because you can start to develop habits that could potentially bite you in the ass when it's time to turn up the heat, so to speak. So it is something that I do advise for more experienced contest prep athletes and those who have walked the path many times, because they get the process They recognize the importance of habits, structure, routines at the end of the prep. But for newcomers and those new to the game of bodybuilding, it may be a wise idea to have a little bit less flexibility just to ensure that you do make it in the end. Because if you have too much flexibility at the start and things start to get a little out of hand, obviously it can be a lot harder to bring things back when the time calls for it.
Yeah, and as you said as well, that more experienced guys can actually, or girls can actually just eyeball stuff more accurate. And I think it's also a point for intuitive eating in the off season. Like, you don't just throw intuitive eating at like a complete beginner, because yeah, I mean, intuitive eating in the modern day, at least at yeah, it's kind
Not
of like,
conducive to weight loss.
yeah, not really what did you just said, like
Conducive.
conducive to getting striated glutes and actually getting down to essential body fat levels.
Yeah, definitely, man. I think, a very flexible or habit-based approach is only going to work with somebody who has a sufficient level
Yeah,
of experience. But that brings me full circle to a really important point. When discussing starting a contest prep, you shouldn't be starting a contest prep from a position of weakness. This is something that Steve Hall, myself, and my colleague Lyndon Purcell in our ebook, contest prep ebook that we're putting together, this is
cool, man.
what we discuss. We talk about how a contest prep needs to start from a position of strength, and that is obviously in the appropriate body fat percentages, having low diet fatigue, and a history of successful dieting. So if you want to adopt a flexible diet in your contest prep, but you have never tracked calories and macros before,
Yeah,
or at least been able to lose, a significant amount of weight or, improve your body composition using that methodology, then you have no place coming into a contest prep and trying to use that methodology, because it will eat you up and spit you back out. Quick, smart.
I think it's just a point of a beginner shouldn't probably do a contest prep.
Definitely. But even then, there's a lot of advanced lifters, and I
Yeah,
think this is an important point. A lot of advanced lifters who have the physique that could win them a pro card, who have never tracked their calories
yeah,
and
good
macros,
good point.
that may be wanting to come into a contest prep, see somebody like Alberto Nunez or myself adopting these kind of methodologies and want to apply that themselves, and they simply just shouldn't be doing so.
Yeah, good point. Um, yeah, I think on flexible dieting, I often see like the two extremes, like, or not really on flexible dieting. I see like this, like, really, if it fits your macros, just eat your micros and then eat whatever you want approach. And then I see kind of like the clean eating, as you would say in the, I don't know, bro science world. um, and I mean, in the end, in your contest prep, at least in the later stages, even if you could eat potentially like ice cream or something, that doesn't mean you have to, or you should actually.
Yeah, definitely. I think flexible dieting is a concept that has been extremely bastardized
Yeah,
in the fitness industry, and it's highly misinterpreted by a lot of individuals. And if we really boil down to it, it's just an inclusive diet focused around moderation, and it's more a
yeah,
mindset than it is a set of dieting principles or rules, or a methodology such as tracking your calories. And I think, as you mentioned, towards the end of your contest prep, there's going to be a need to decrease the amount of flexibility in your food choices and the inclusiveness and the moderation in which you exhibit with your diet, simply as a function of needing to maximize satiation, eliminate food
yeah,
focus, and adhere to a calorie deficit in what is a period of semi-starvation. And there's a lot to be said for a more rigid, structured, and restrictive approach, in the back end of a contest prep, because it will allow you to get the job done. Now, it's not to say that you should have a very rigid mindset around your diet, but I think having, a very or a limited number of foods that you're consuming that keep you full for longer, that are going to help you hit your targets, protein, carbs, and fats, within the degree of accuracy that you need, and also, foods that don't set off any, binging, and typically that's going to be the food choices that are not hyper palatable, which are quote unquote bro foods, your chicken, your broccoli. It's funny how in a contest prep, right now, super flexible. I'm eating, anything and everything, just making it work. And in, 6 months' time, those final few weeks, I know that it's just going to be, chicken, broccoli, asparagus, and all the quote unquote clean foods. So, yeah, flexibility is definitely something that has to taper down and be reduced during the contest prep. But that's the price we pay when we sign up for the process of bodybuilding. We need to recognize that it is very much a difficult journey to the stage, and it's not something that's going to allow us to continue to do everything we would like in life and our diet and training. From start to finish, it changes. A lot of things change when you get, below your settling point and contest prep ready.
Yeah. I think it's also really good to kind of remind yourself, like, often that you just do it you do it on your own. Nobody's forcing you. Like, you have a fridge at your home. Like, you will not starve yourself. But like,
definitely, it is a choice, and I think it's a really good point.
Yeah,
it's a really good point because, people often forget that even if we're dieting and it's not a bodybuilding contest prep, it's a choice. There is food available, and by choosing to diet and improve our body composition, we are giving up some element of freedom when it comes to, what we put down our gullet, so to speak. And in choosing bodybuilding, we are inherently choosing to give up, to some degree, relationships, a healthy body image, our perception of self, our, potentially tarnishing our relationship with food. We give up our physical health and strength, our well-being, and obviously the mental aspects and, some psychological issues that can surface are all very much realities when we're being competitive bodybuilders. And if you're not willing or able to give up these things temporarily, or at least have them be affected in a negative way, then a contest prep probably isn't for you. And again, we need to make sure that this is all very much in the foreground of discussions before starting a contest prep, because if you sign up to this thing and you're not willing to do all of the above, then you're going to be in for a very rough time.
Yeah, you actually have to love it. It just has to be a passion. Actually, you made a good point with talking to people before you do it. But maybe we will keep that for structuring. We have like a later topic, and maybe we will keep it for that. Do you want to take anything on the contest prep flexibility, or should we just go on?
Yeah, we could talk a little more about cardio and training for the contest prep flexibility.
Yeah, cool.
So, and in regards to cardio flexibility, obviously a lot of people will, be doing their cardio as their coach prescribes for the set duration or the set number of calories that they're required to be burning. And I do recommend this, but with me, I can, again, draw on my own experiences over the last 4 months. It's very difficult for me to get in my prescribed cardio, which is around 45 minutes per session. And I often have to break that up and do 30 minutes here, 15 minutes there, But again, like our calories and our macros, if we're looking at the big picture and our intake and expenditure, not just on acute timeframes, but over longer periods, that's really important. So I think also understanding that you're not a failure or going off plan if you miss a cardio session, especially early on in the prep, can be beneficial in just letting things settle in during the contest prep. And I've definitely found that. But at the end of the day, we do need to build habits around cardio, because it's extremely important for later in the contest prep, especially if you're someone who will have to do higher amounts of cardio, such as small females or those who are very responsive to reductions in energy intake. And we also need to get a feel for the concurrent effects of cardio and resistance training on recovery. So obviously when cardio is in at the start, it's good to get used to doing your cardio training and being in that fatigue state a little bit more. But again, we can have some flexibility with cardio just like we do our nutrition. And also for training. A lot of people perceive training to be this, all or nothing thing that they have to do. And they have to get in 7 sessions if they're doing a contest prep per week, or they have to be training for an hour and a half, and if they skip a set or don't have time or miss a session, then it's all doom and gloom. But I think, again, applying a very flexible approach to our training is beneficial during a contest prep, especially at the start. Again, bearing in mind that we need to build habits around this, and keep an eye on not letting those negative behaviors and whatnot start to surface, because that'll detriment the prep later on. But myself as an example, there are days where I might miss out on the last 1 or 2 exercises in my session simply because I've run out of time. And instead of crying about it and feeling like a absolute failure and I'm not hardcore enough to be a bodybuilder, I can move those to another session, and as long as I get my weekly volume in, that's far more important than absolutely nailing the plan every single day. But again, as the prep continues and we start to get deeper and deeper into the prep, we need to manage fatigue a lot more carefully, and we're going to need to have a little more structure around things, and again, turning the notch up and on the dimmer switch. But definitely some flexibility around training, even training days. It's great to have routine, and many people will thrive on having that set routine, but it's not the end of the world if a session is pushed back or forward due to time constraints or other commitments that are affecting your training schedule. And again, we need to have some flexibility with our training in every sense, and that includes load selection, volumes, all the exercise selection. At the end of the day, what built the muscle will keep the muscle, so we very much need to train in a similar manner to how we would in the off season. That is, building, through each microcycle, having progressions in place, and obviously, volume, frequency, intensity, the big rocks of program design. But we aren't going to lose a heap of muscle at the start of the contest prep if, we miss a set here and there. And I think, again, sustainability and longevity, if you're going through an extended contest prep, is far more important than getting super caught up on the minutiae and the details of, volume and all of these, variables related to training in the initial phases. If you're getting in the gym, you're putting sufficient stimulus on the muscles, you're enjoying it, and you're training relatively hard at the appropriate time and not doing anything silly, I think that's more than okay at the start of a contest prep. And again, as you get into things, that's when it's time to start monitoring a lot more closely, like we do our nutrition, all the variables, because you will lose some tissue if you don't.
That were a lot of good points, actually. I think it's just important to have some type of structure and just have some type of, like, for example, a mesocycle structure, which will then will be divided into each different microcycles. But in the end, life happens, and especially if you're somebody who's as busy as you are. And I mean, you can always make this choice to just skip a set or skip an exercise and do it later. And I think in the end, as you said, in the beginning it will be less detrimental than, let's say, in the last month of contest prep. So yeah, a lot of good points. I actually had more to say, but I just cannot remember everything. So actually, do you have a step goal like right now, or do you just have prescribed cardio?
At the moment, just prescribed cardio.
Okay.
My partner has the energy tracking device, so we've got one in our house, and she's taken it from me. She won't let me wear it because she loves it. So I told her that in the back end of the contest prep, I have to take that from her, and she's pretty upset about that. So for now, she's wearing that. I'm just getting my cardio in, but I'm very conscious of my daily steps.
Okay.
And just making sure that I'm trying to keep things as consistent as possible, and just being aware of my slouching. If I'm sitting down a little more often, not standing up, moving as much as what I would when I'm not as fatigued and tired. But yeah, I've definitely started to notice now more so in the last couple of weeks than at the start. My NEAT will definitely have been dropping. So I've been making sure that as a result of that, I've just been walking a little bit more. So I actually park a little bit further from my work. I've actually removed my bank card from my wallet, which means I have to walk down a couple of blocks to the bank to withdraw cardless cash. So I can't just go to the coffee shops and the things around the area and just give them my card. I actually have to make the trip back and forth a couple of times a day to get cash. Also, walking to the grocery store, walking to get my coffees, just little things like that. Not going over the top. It's not as if I'm just, I'm going to be the NEAT machine. But just knowing that I'm probably not going to be burning calories like I normally would when I'm working and doing other daily activities that I would normally be burning more calories with, just because I'm standing more, fidgeting, moving. I'm trying to just make up for that with other areas that are going to lead to that net energy expenditure hopefully being the same.
Those NEAT hacks.
NEAT hacks.
Yeah, it's actually, I remember in my last mini cut I actually applied it as well in the end, because I had a step goal, and I just parked away a little bit farther and maybe walking in between sets a little bit more, and that just added up actually. And yeah,
it does in a big way. And yeah, another thing I do is play with my daughter. That's a lot of fun. We kick the soccer ball around, and she loves that. So that's something I'm going to keep doing during the prep to hopefully keep myself nice and active.
That's a really lovely NEAT hack, actually.
Yeah.
So what does your current training look like? I know that 3MJ sometimes program a flexible split, like just flexible programming, where you have like a set of structure for your main lifts. And then you can just do your accessories wherever you want to do them. Do you do something like this?
So I'm actually...
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm actually programming for myself at the moment.
Yeah, you said
so I'm in charge of the training program. So yeah, there's a lot of flexibility within the training structure. I have reduced my frequency from 5 sessions to 4 sessions a week. And that's proving to work really, really well, because it has given me even more flexibility with the weekly scheduling of my sessions. Within each session, I have one compound lift. That's the focus movement or the primary lift for that session. For example, day 1 is an incline dumbbell press. Day 2 is the high bar squat. Day 3 is the pull down. And day 4 is the trap bar deadlift. And for these lifts, I have a little bit of flexibility built into them. So I'm using top sets and back off sets at the moment, which I think is a really great strategy to keeping some intensity load and obviously effort on the bar, as well as allowing for sufficient volume without accumulating too much fatigue during the contest prep. So I think this is a great strategy that can be very beneficial in training for bodybuilders as they are near those lower ends of their body fat settling point. And on these lifts, the top sets, I have a range prescribed load that I have to hit for a certain RPE. Now, obviously, the leaner we get, the less energy we have available, the more that's going to affect training performance. We have lower mechanical force production, our leverages changes, we get joint soreness, and quite simply, we just don't have the vigor and motivation to lift heavy weights. Yeah. So I think it's great to have a range with your loads and some parameters to work in with that for a prescribed RPE. And again, this has a number of assumptions. When applying this kind of tool, you need to know how to use the RPE scale appropriately. You need to be as objective as possible whilst using a subjective measure, and you need to understand the system in and of itself, just like flexible dieting. And within the session from there, it's very flexible. I have my prescribed movements, after that my accessory lifts, and they are for a certain number of sets. So I try to keep my weekly sets very much the same at the moment, and the progressions coming from either adding reps, load, or reducing the RPE. Now, all I'm trying to do is one of those things. And if I can do one of those things on one or two movements, then it's a good sign that we're keeping the tissue around, and that's the goal. If I can't progress and I can keep things the same on all movements, then that's not necessarily a bad thing either, no. Provided we are not regressing or seeing huge reductions in training volume or relative intensity and load on the bar, then we're golden. So, yeah, that's how the training program's set up. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of trying to progress too hard all the time, especially in a contest prep, and especially now that we have had this huge movement in the volume camp. So everybody's getting extremely excited about set volume and the number of weekly sets that they're performing, working from their MEV to their MRV, from 10 to 20 sets, excuse me, across all of their exercises, all of their muscle groups. And in contest prep, that's a pretty silly idea, and you'll there'll be some non-functional overreaching very early in the mesocycle. You will probably get hurt, and then you'll be on the sidelines and you won't be getting on the stage. So, as Mike outlines in his Volume Landmarks book, our maximum recoverable volume is reduced, when we're in hypercaloric conditions, and I think this is really important to note. Our minimum effective volume also increases because we need to maintain tissue, and that gives us a much smaller window to work with, and advanced athletes having an even smaller window. And I wouldn't even classify myself as advanced. I'd say that I'm, a late intermediate, and the window is, pretty small, but nowhere near as small as, someone like Jared Feather or, individuals like that. So we need to be doing a little bit more, but we can't do as much as what we normally would. And I think keeping the number of weekly sets pretty much the same across, the mesocycle is a good idea in a contest prep, because we have less moving parts, and we know that the intensity will determine the type of adaptation, but the volume will determine the magnitude of that adaptation. So if we're adding in a set every week for multiple exercises, there's going to be quite a large increase in training volume, and we simply don't have the recovery capacity to, or the resources to elicit, high magnitudes in hypertrophic adaptations, neural adaptations, all of those kind of things, because we're in a net catabolic state. So we need to understand that greater increases in volume require more food, more sleep for those adaptations to come about. And when we're dieting, we don't have those things, so we're not making a lot of adaptation. And at best, muscle protein synthesis is just going to come back to baseline, and that means we're going to retain our muscle. If not, well, say goodbye to your hard-earned gains.
Yeah, those were a lot of good points, actually. I think most people don't realize that those volume landmarks actually change when you're in hypocaloric states. And yeah, as you said, your MEV will decrease while your MEV will increase, which would then leads to your MAV being like lower actually. And yeah, I think in the beginning you can do like a little bit of set progression. For example, if your MEV is around like
Yes.
14 sets or something, and your MRV is around 16 or 17, and you just
And
do
I did
like
that.
one set more.
Yeah.
But I think the longer you diet and the longer you are actually in a hypocaloric state and recovery will decrease, then those range will be
Definitely.
a less smaller and will decrease over the month. And yeah, that's a good strategy actually, I think.
Yeah, and yeah, just to speak to your point on the start of the prep, you can be a little bit more aggressive for sure. And I can use my programming as an example for my quads. I went from, I think it was 14 sets per week in my first block, 14 to 18 sets over the course of 5 weeks, and now I'm sitting at 12 sets per week.
Okay, 12
Right,
sets
and
average, right?
yes,
Oh,
12
okay.
sets in total. So just below, what I was doing initially, it would be 16 sets because I'm including the top sets as well. So it's broken down across more sets now. But 16 sets per week now in comparison to the 14 moving to 18. So we're just trying to hold things steady and make sure that, too many moving parts in a contest prep is not a good thing on the training front. The more you keep things consistent, simple, and you aim for progression, like I said, in an additional rep here and there, increasing load or reducing the relative intensity, that is, proximity to failure or RPE, RIR. Those three areas would be the key determinants of progression. That's not going to lead to too much fatigue accumulation.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. I think the dynamic volume, especially in those huge ranges, works really, really good when gaining. Like I had a lot of good results with clients and also with myself since I do it, changing from a more steady volume approach. But I think in dieting you definitely have to be more conservative and less aggressive, and yeah, a lot of good points made.
For sure.
We will continue with preparing for consequences caused by semi-starvation. So, what do you think is like appropriate way to as we said, you will probably have a talk with your loved ones before you start the diet. That's probably a good thing to do in the beginning. But like, what do you think? What are some good tips for the listeners and actually the watchers on YouTube for doing a contest prep and then preparing for consequences of that?
Yeah, awesome. So I think first familiarize yourself, especially if you're new to competing, as to what this process entails. So you are going to be hungry beyond, anything you've ever experienced before. You're going to have brain fog, so your ability to think clearly is going to be seriously limited. You're going to be very lethargic, low energy. Your libido is going to plummet. You'll have a very high food focus, mood swings. You'll be extremely cold, low blood pressure, which equates to lightheadedness and some dizziness. A lot of self-doubt, and obviously dealing with the pressure and anxiety that can often come about with a contest prep. So it sounds like a really negative process. However, I will say that bodybuilding, whilst definitely the most challenging experience that anybody can go through, it's very, very fulfilling, and it's one of the most beneficial human experiences that you could face long term, because the benefits that it can have in teaching you about yourself, nutrition, training, and just everything related to life, because you appreciate so much more when it all gets taken away from you. And I think it can be quite a positive experience if it's approached in the right way, and you are understanding that there's going to be this short-term hit to your quality of life before it improves post-show. So yeah, definitely understanding and familiarizing yourself with the consequences of natural bodybuilding is important. But then in dealing with them, I think it's a good idea, and this is something we talk about in the ebook, to have a set of strategies or systems in place so that you can appropriately manage them. So in terms of the hunger, obviously ghrelin is going to increase, leptin decreases, and that we could get into the physiology of hunger and why that comes about, but I think we won't bore the listeners. But you need to create a consistent meal structure and schedule. And we just spoke about flexibility at the start of a contest prep being tapered down towards the end of a contest prep. Well, at the end of a contest prep, you're going to be really hungry, which is why you probably need more structure and a routine and schedule around your food. Like I mentioned, reducing consumption of like hyperpalatable foods, opting for higher volume, energy sparse food choices such as massive salads, cruciferous greens, all of those kind of things. Potentially increasing your protein intake to the upper limit, and just increasing fiber intake in general, alongside water intake and copious amounts of caffeine. Anything that's going to blunt that hunger can be extremely useful. And another consequence of hunger is that high food focus. So this is simply a survival mechanism, biologically imprinted in the human body, that when it's starving, to go seek out food, and therefore we focus on food to go hunt, to increase energy intake and make sure that we don't die. And in dealing with this, I think it's very useful to stay occupied, keeping yourself busy, having activities that you perform daily in periods between your meals to ensure that you're not allowing yourself to become food focused is extremely important. And this will obviously mean being in an environment that is not exposing you to high amounts of food. So if you're trying to stay occupied by going out with friends for coffee and you're exposed to all this food, and the waiter's asking you, can I get you a cake? It's on special today. And you're forcing yourself to make another decision, which can obviously lead to decision fatigue and consequently bite you in the ass later in the day. The environment you choose needs to be one that is free from food for the most part, but also managing food focus can be by managing stress. A lot of people will turn to food if their perceived stress levels are high. Emotional stress can lead to poor nutritional decisions and choices. So we need to manage stress, and obviously engaging in extracurricular activities, can be a great way to increase your NEAT. So that's the hunger and the food focus side of things. Now, in terms of the brain fog, a lack of concentration, comprehension, and just judgment capabilities is all going to be present when you're dieting, especially towards the end of the contest prep. And your decrease in cognitive function is simply a result of not eating enough, which is problematic, especially if you're as busy as what I am, or you're somebody whose job is dependent on your capacity to think. So it's important to recognize this and identify the periods of the day that you feel the most energetic or that require you to have the most brain function. And if you're afforded the choice, plan your tasks and your daily activities that require the most amount of mental effort and focus to be undertaken during those periods where you have more carbohydrates or you simply feel better. If you're not somebody who has the ability to structure your own schedule, then it's probably a good idea to structure your diet around these times. And again, consuming meals is a great way to obviously improve your ability to perform mentally at any given task during the back end of a contest prep, but it must ensure that you're not compromising your adherence or your performance and recovery. Yep. So it's very much a balancing act, and therefore we probably need to accept that we're simply not going to be able to perform mentally to the same level as what we would, out of contest prep conditions. So lowering your expectations is really important on this front, as well as reducing the volume of tasks that you're trying to perform on the daily. And this is something that I'm definitely experiencing at the moment. I'm simply not able to keep up with the high quantity of work that I'm doing, and something's got to give. So it's very much self-management and being aware that you simply can't do as much and you're going to need to prioritize a little more. So making sure those superfluous and additional things that you would normally do that aren't a number one priority, they need to be taking a back seat, so that you can give all of your very limited energy to those few things that you need to be doing to get paid, pay your bills, and make a living, right? And then we have lethargy. So, yeah, that's probably one that is inherent with the contest prep and everybody knows about. So simply feeling very, very sluggish is part and parcel with bodybuilding. And you look at any bodybuilder when they're a month or two out, a few weeks out, they're going to be dragging their ass around the gym, unless they're Mr. Jan Fraser, who's getting his NEAT in between his sets. But my advice to improving your energy levels, well, there's not a lot you can do. You have to accept that you're going to feel pretty cruddy for the most part. But resting and napping when possible can be very useful. Obviously, it must be done so without compromising total daily energy expenditure. So if you're taking a nap and you're losing a couple of hundred steps, well, you got to make that up elsewhere, and it's very much a tug of war. But if you nap before you go and train, well, the net benefits in being able to keep the tissue around could lead to a better physique than if you were awake and you got an extra couple of hundred steps in. So it is a trade-off, but sleeping, napping, caffeine, obviously very useful in improving energy levels, and definitely tapering caffeine with diet breaks or refeed days, so that when you're on your low days, it has that stimulatory effect and you're resensitized to the benefits of it. I think that's very useful strategy as well. So yeah, accept that you're going to feel like shit and deal with it. So that's all you can really do with that one. And then sleep quality is a huge one. Excuse me, we're both coughing quite a lot. It's contagious.
No problem.
And sleep quality and duration are going to really take a hit simply because, stress, the physiological stress of energy restriction will disturb the balance of wakefulness and rest, because the body is seeking out food, is simply just not able to sleep for as long or as well. So prioritizing your sleep hygiene and everything related to your nighttime bed conditions is really important. Aim to sleep as much as possible for longer than you normally would, because it's going to be broken. You're going to be waking up in the middle of the night, going to the toilet multiple times. I did that 3 times last night, and it's super frustrating. It's very cold in Melbourne, and getting out of bed is the last thing I want to do. And I should take my own advice and try to sleep for longer, as opposed to doing podcasts with you at 5 a.m. in the morning.
Thank you so
But
much, man.
no. I love it. It's good. I wouldn't get out of bed this early if I didn't enjoy it and love it. But you should be aiming to sleep for longer, simply because it's not going to be as high quality. And again, avoiding exposure to electronics, 30 minutes before you go to sleep is a good idea. There's some research around that now. Avoid consuming liquids a few hours before you go to bed, and create a routine. I know you use the Headspace app, and I get a lot of my clients to use that. I think that's a good way to start relaxing and unwinding before you try to fall asleep. And keep your ritual the same each night, from the time you go to bed to what activities you're performing, in those final few minutes or hours before you put your head on the pillow. Ensure your room is cool, dark, comfortable. Only use the bedroom, for its intended purpose if you really want to, maximize your sleep hygiene. So that is, your bedroom's for sleeping, not for working, and it's for sex as well. So that's all good in my books. And I think biasing your carbohydrates towards the evening can be useful, not just from an adherence standpoint, but we can also see some benefits, to sleep-related hormones, neurotransmitters, and that can be all the more beneficial for helping you rest a little better. And then supplements would be, melatonin. You can get your hands on it, 500 mcgs to 1 milligram. And like my man Steve Hall advocates, the UV blocking goggles are always a great way to ensure you don't get laid before bed, but you might get a good night's rest. So, that's some of the side effects. And the big one, which you were talking about in terms of communicating with your partner and setting yourself up, with a support system, or somebody who at least understands the process, is so important, because you're going to change a lot throughout this process, not just in terms of your libido, but the mood swings, your emotional capacity to be supportive, and do all the usual things that you would do if you're in a relationship. So obviously, as I discussed earlier, there's a lot of reductions in the sex hormones due to lower body fat percentages and just a lack of energy availability. The body's not prioritizing reproduction right now. It's focusing on surviving. So open communication is critical, especially to anyone who's affected by your decisions. And I think a lot of people forget this, that, we're affecting ourselves quite a lot in this process, which inherently will affect them, especially if they are, important to us and we have a very strong relationship or, some form of connection with them. And the loss of libido will affect your sex life, and you need to either A, make it up to them beforehand. Before you start the prep, you need to be like a rabbit and get jiggy with it. Or B, during the contest prep, making sure that you're continuing to do things that are romantic or, showing your affection and love in different ways, such as having a date night and just dedicating time and effort to your partner. So every week, me and my partner, we go to dinner or the movies, although diet flexibility will decrease over the course of the contest prep. We go to the movies and hang out together every Friday night. And that's, obviously my way of showing her that I love her, because right now I can't show her in other ways. And an important point on that is your drive to do it versus rising with the morning sun will drop quicker. And what I mean by that is you will not be as driven to engage in sexual activity simply because you're a little bit more fatigued, but your sex hormones will not have taken a hit as much as what you probably think they have in those early phases of the contest prep, just because of the stress that's associated with dieting, contest prep in general. Again, this is highly related to libido, and Alberto and I discussed this in one of our conversations that we had, and if you're still rising with the morning sun, then everything is a-okay in the sex hormone department.
Yeah.
But you could be rising with the morning sun, but just have no drive whatsoever.
Hmm.
It's when we start to see that, waking up and you're just stone cold Steve Austin down there. That's when we need to start saying, hey, okay, the libido's taking a hit. Now it's time to, start really focusing on looking after our partner in other ways because it's just not working the way it should. And also, this is a great sign for a refeed, diet breaks, getting out of the calorie deficit to pick up some of these, the shutdown from energy restriction. But yeah, man, there's a lot of other consequences, but I think they're the main ones that people can take some benefit from. Yeah, I hope that was useful for you guys.
Definitely, it was a really good summation. Also, the points you made on sleep, improving sleep quality and just sleep hygiene. I think I heard like really bad things. Like I heard a really experienced and competitor that he went out peeing for 7 times a night, which is actually really bad. I mean, the last time I was dieting, I went for like 1 to 2 times in one night, and that was actually worsening my sleep like a lot. Like I felt it. Just like if you are awake at the night, that will just decrease the effect that you get from the sleep. And um, there were a few other points that I will want to have a quick discussion. Just really quick, can you see and hear me okay? Because I think at some point the audio,
Yes.
like the quality just dropped at my end, and video quality right now is okay, but it was like really worse like a minute ago or so. But you can still hear me.
Yeah, 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 everything's fine on mine. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you made a lot of good points. Like stress management is a huge one. Like just getting into routines and having habits. Like for example, the meditation that you mentioned. Like just maybe meditating in the morning or maybe even in the evening before you sleep. And then just other stuff that you mentioned, like nutrient timing, is a huge one. I think as long as your diet goes, like the longer the diet go, the more important nutrient timing will get. Just to have those carbs around priorities, like whether it's like something that you have to be there intellectual or like training, or doing something with your loved ones, and you have to be like mentally there because at some point you're just in zombie mode. And yeah, being busy is also like a huge one. I think like being busy, sometimes if you're like really busy, you just forget that you're actually dieting. So
Definitely, man. Definitely. And I think a little side note on that, something that I discussed, which I haven't heard anyone else really talk about, is I called it the deficit dilemma. And that is we try to be as busy as possible to avoid food and to adhere to our diets, but inherently we can cause ourselves to become more stressed and fatigued in a period where
yeah,
we are already highly stressed state and we're already very fatigued. And yeah, I think this poses quite a serious dilemma for people because they do reach this hyper aroused state, which can cause anxiety and a lot of other issues. So I think, yes, we need to be more focused on doing a lot of activities and keeping the mind busy, but we also need to pay
yeah.
equal attention to the other end of the spectrum, which is keeping ourselves in check and taking care of our health and our mental well-being.
A good point, and actually, what you also mentioned that at some point you have to kind of accept the fact that you're just not that you just cannot have the workload that you had before,
Mm,
like just the amount of work you can do, and like just your productivity, like probably everything in your life will decrease a bit, and just accepting that and not trying to fight against it at some point is probably also a really good idea. Like what you just mentioned,
yeah,
like
man, for sure.
last times I dieted for um, a good 5 months last year, and
Hmm.
at the end my productivity dropped by a lot. not a lot, but like a good chunk. And
Yeah, you've got to adjust your expectations and
yeah.
yeah, manage your time very well.
So, Jacob, cool. I think we covered a lot of topics. I also know
Yeah, man.
we on it like an hour now. So,
I know. We're gonna have to wrap up. I got to get to work.
yeah, definitely. So,
We'll have to do another one. This is fun.
yeah, um, we actually have this one topic that you did a YouTube video on that we maybe cover in future.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that.
Cool. So Jacob, thank you again for actually um, doing this podcast and yeah, making the time and the energy in contest prep to do this. Um, Before I wrap up, where can people find your work and JPS and yeah, everything, your social media? Just this is the point where you can just plug everything.
Yeah, so check out JPS Health and Fitness, Facebook and Instagram. My personal Instagram is obviously just my name, and yeah, YouTube channel JPS Health and Fitness. I put out a lot of content, and I try to help as many people as I can. So I appreciate all you guys following, and yeah, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you for doing this and chat soon, mate. Have a good one.
Easy, man. You too. Thank you so much, Jan Frizz. You have a great day.
Cool. You too. Bye.